Yeah. Dum, 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 dum. All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Rooting for Laundry. I'm your host, Johnny McDonald. This is episode 21 on Labor Day. Happy Labor Day for those who celebrate. Follow us at Root for Laundry on Twitter and IG. Today's team we're going to cover is the Chicago Cubs. Legendary team, legendary players. They won a World Series for the first time in over 108 years. And I got the perfect guest to talk all Cubs memories and all things Cubs. Love this guy. I love talking to him about baseball. He has a podcast called Three Strikes, presented by Outsports. So if you can look for that, and you'll get tons of baseball stuff. And he was recently on Fox 5 New York talking about the Tom Brennaman situation. Tom Brennaman was the baseball announcer that said a homophobic slur couple like last month or something. And a good friend of mine and Chicago's own, give it up for Ken Schultz.
Hey, Johnny Mac, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being had, man. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. Happy Labor Day to you. And just wanted to note right off the start that the Cubs are celebrating Labor Day by also taking the weekend off.
I think you guys will be all right, then.
I'm sorry?
I think you guys will be all right, though. There's hope.
It would have to be a profound collapse for them to miss the playoffs in a year where 8 teams in the NL are going to be making the playoffs, but it certainly feels like, at least over the past 3 days, that they're taking the dare. So
that's right, true. At least they're better than the Mets, though. We're still trying to find 500, so it's not going to happen. All right, so let's get into it. How'd you become a Cubs? I know you're a native of Chicago, of course, but yeah, how did you embrace all things Chicago Cubs?
Yeah, I have to be careful when I say native of Chicago because I grew up in the north suburbs in a town called Vernon Hills. So anywhere outside of the city, like when I was living in New York, I would immediately say, yep, from Chicago. But if I'm ever around anybody who happens to actually be from Chicago, it's got to be like, yeah, from the Chicago suburbs.
Yeah. It's like being like a New Yorker being from Long Island or Westchester County. It's just a similar situation.
Yes. And
the areas of... Go ahead. I'm sorry. Say that again.
But every bit is racist too in some parts of
the world. Yeah. What the thing is, it's like the same to New York and Chicago, like the two biggest metro areas in probably the world. You know, it's like, yeah, not everybody can live there. As big as New York is and kind of big as Chicago is, not everybody can live in the city limits of Chicago. But, you know, if you're close enough, you're from Chicago. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so we were about a 45-minute drive from Wrigley Field when I was a kid. So I am a third or fourth generation Cub fan. I'm not sure if my great grandfather on my dad's side was or not, but it's been something that's been passed down like many curses family lines. So yeah, I honestly don't know any period of my life where I wasn't a Cub fan or obsessed with this team, just because that's kind of how it developed. My first game my dad took me to was in May of 1980 when I was 1.5 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, of course, I have
started you early.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I had no choice in the matter, which is the cruelest thing my parents did to me. It's the perfect first Cub game too, because it was against the Phillies, who went on to win the World Series that year.
Yeah, with Pete Rose.
Yep, Pete Rose, Mike Schmidt, that whole group. And it was a day where Mike Schmidt hit 2 home runs and Steve Carlton pitched a shutout, and the Cubs lost 7-0. So yeah.
Wow. So
there we go.
So you found out the hard way. It's like, oh, this is how it's going to be for the rest of my life. This
is your life, young man. Yeah. You've got 1.5 years of thinking life is okay and the world isn't cruel. Guess what? Here's reality.
What's funny is you said like it's your 4th, 5th generation of Cubs fans, and they were pretty dominant over a century ago.
Yeah, they were great in the early 20th. The early part of every century seems to be when they kind of get it together. They were the first team in history of just baseball to repeat as world champions, 1907, 1908.
Yeah.
Over that 5-year span, 1906 to 1910, they won more games in 5 years than any other team in baseball history. Like any 5 years of Yankee history, you can find do not compare to 1906 to 1910. They were also the team that in 1906 won 116 games, which is tied with the 2001 Mariners for most ever in a regular season, and they did it in a 154 game season too. And here's a fun fact: neither of those teams won a World Series.
It's crazy. And then they lost the game to the White Sox, right? The World Series to the White Sox. Yeah,
that was 1906, where the year they won 116. They lost to a team called the Hitless Wonder White Sox. So it wasn't just any White Sox, but the most humiliating possible White Sox team you could lose to. So yeah.
And I know I always ask you the question. I mean, being from Chicago, like the vibe in New York, I know with Mets and Yankees fans is like it's maybe 70. I would say 70-30, or maybe like the gap is even closer after those 80s Mets teams were good, the 86 winning World Series. So I want to say it's a little less than 70 and over 30% Yankees Mets. But I know the White Sox kind of don't exist in Chicago. It's like, I would say 90-10 maybe, or maybe.
It's not that lopsided, but it is definitely a Cubs town first and foremost. Partly because it's very geographically aligned, where North Side is so strongly Cubs, South Side especially is so strongly White Sox.
Yeah.
The sense is that because the Cubs are a national team and the White Sox are like not just a local team, but a group of neighborhoods within the local team, like it's heavily concentrated. Like it's a major part of South Side pride in the city, which I guess in baseball terms is probably good. In other terms, not so much. Southside pride sometimes translates to a little too many MAGA hats, but
gotcha.
And to be fair, the Cubs are owned by the most Trump-supporting family in Major League Baseball. So
they're
not immune up here, certainly. But yeah, I'd say it's probably closer to a 70-30 or 65-35. Just because the White Sox are passed down, it's almost by decree on the South Side that you will root for the White Sox because we are native Southsiders, and you will also root against the Cubs with everything you have, because the way it works. And New York is maybe somewhat similar, but you might be able to correct me on this. In terms of the rivalry, Cub fans, we look down our noses at the White Sox. White Sox fans hate the Cubs.
Because they've been the center of attention. Like I said, I mean, I remember the Cubs, you associate losing with the Cubs for so long, and the White Sox, remember, they won the World Series in 2005. So you would think there would be a little bit of a balance, but not so much. Whereas the Mets, Yankees, it's really different. Like I personally don't hate the Yankees. I guess because it's like the Cubs and White Sox, they're in two different leagues. So the games that they play are most likely not meaningful games. Whereas, you know what I'm saying? You play what you're for. You do it for the rivalry. You do it for the city. You do it for the bragging. It's good ratings, I guess, for the city at the end. It's a good feel for the city at the end of the day. But it's not going to affect the standings. You know what I'm saying? Unless they, they don't schedule those cross city rival games. They schedule them like in the middle of the summer. You know what I'm saying? Where like in like June, July, they're not scheduling September where it's like like a race for playoff berth, and like we're not playing the Yankees in September, and you guys are probably not playing the White Sox in September either.
Right. I think the best way that I can kind of describe it to you, and it's calmed down a little bit now because both teams have a World Series in the past 15 years.
So, there's no tension. There's no,
It's almost like it occurred to everybody that, oh yeah, this is actually why we're playing baseball. This is what you should be going for. But I'll use two examples to describe it to you best in terms of how much it means. I went to the first year of interleague play in 1997. It was just 3 games at Comiskey Park in the South Side. Then Comiskey now.
Whatever name. U.S. Cellular.
Yeah. And it was a game where the Cubs got shut out 3-0. Wilson Alvarez pitched a complete game. It was over in 2 hours. The Cubs had very little offensive threat. It was a terrible Cubs team that year too. Both teams were going nowhere. But what I remember most is that afterwards, because this was the rubber game of the series too, so that meant the White Sox won 2 of the 3 games. We were in one of the outerlying parking lots at Comiskey, and the traffic was going nowhere for 40 minutes. Wow. And there was a truck that was 1 row ahead of us. And every single time someone walked past with a Cubs hat or a Cubs shirt or a Cubs jersey, the guy in the truck would lean out the window and just yell, "Cubs suck!" over and over and over for 45 solid minutes of just sitting there.
That's a long time.
Cubs suck! Cubs suck! Cubs suck! So, yeah, like that is the fuel of kind of White Sox Cubs in the city. And it runs real deep. Like the other example that I can think of, and this actually happened when the White Sox won the World Series in 2005, is that at their rally following their championship parade through downtown, I think both Hawk Harrelson and Paul Konerko made sure to mention, hey, so where are the Northsiders? Where's their parade today? Looks like they're still at home. The biggest day, the best day in their franchise history.
They have nothing better to do beside acknowledge.
Yeah. The first thing they still thought of was the Cubs. And
wow.
Yeah. So you hear that enough, and it sinks in on you as to how much visceral the hatred is when that comes in your direction as a Cub fan.
Wow. All right, so I'm going to start the timeline around 1987. I know in 1984 the Cubs went to the NLCS and they lost to San Diego. And Ryan Sandberg won the MVP, probably the best Cub probably in your generation, right? Is that your favorite player?
Yes, yeah, he has been my guy. My first real baseball memory is 1984. It was a game my dad and I went to in like August of that year. And on the way, I remember him telling me in the car that Ryan Sandberg is the best player in the game. Rick Sutcliffe is the best pitcher. And in that game, Ryan Sandberg hit a home run in the first inning. Sutcliffe pitched a shutout. The Cubs were brilliant, and my dad is a genius.
Yeah.
So, ever since then, Rhino was my guy.
And that was a heartbreaking year because they just to go to the NLCS, and it's so hard. Like the regular season meant more because now you have a little more playoff berth, but it was only 4 teams were going from each
year. Because that was also the first year they'd made any postseason berth since 1945. And there's a famous little moment on the night they clinched in Pittsburgh that year where Cub fans took over Pittsburgh, like tends to happen anytime the Cubs are good. We travel really well. And in the middle of that game, as it was clear the Cubs were on their way to winning, a group of fans unfurled a bedsheet in Old Three Rivers Stadium that just read, 39 years of suffering is enough. Like, on the one hand, wonderful. It's also like the most Reagan era sentiment possible. Like the biggest amount of suffering in your life is, my team didn't make the playoffs again. My life is horrible.
Wow.
But yeah, that was why 84 meant so much to so many people. And it still does. It's one of the magical years in Cub history up until 2016.
Yep. So like 84, I remember, I'll move forward to 1987 where the Cubs didn't have that's my first good memory of baseball. That's the Cubs. It's weird because the Cubs finished last in the NL East, but you had the MVP and Andre Dawson, and that was his. And that's his first season in a Cubs uniform, right?
Yeah, and they have MLB owner collusion to thank for it. It was no great stroke of genius for them to sign Andre Dawson. You ever hear the story of how that happened?
I really don't. Yeah, tell me, please.
So that was the winter of 86, 87 was when owner collusion was at its worst, that they were just nobody, no free agents were being signed. Like Dawson, Tim Raines are like the two most prominent ones who were on the free agent market and were getting no offers. And finally, it got to the point where Dawson was so desperate to get out of Montreal because his knees were completely shot playing on the Olympic Stadium turf. He wanted to go somewhere where, that was playing on
grass, please.
Right. And so he decided it was either the Cubs or Atlanta where he wanted to go. And I forget exactly why he picked the Cubs. Like he says back in the day, Bleacher fans used to say, "When are you going to come play for us?" But that also sounds like pandering. So
yeah,
it's a good story. But so he decided that the Cubs were going to be his focus. So spring training had opened and he was still on the market. And he and his agent randomly showed up to spring training early on in February. And were like just hanging out outside to the point where the Cubs GM, Dallas Green, went to the media and was just like, "I don't know what he's doing. I'm mad. There's nothing to this." And they finally called a meeting. And Andre Dawson and his agent went to the meeting with Dallas Green and the Tribune Company. And they laid essentially a blank contract on the table and said, "We want to play for you. We want to play for you so much. Wow. Here's a contract. Fill in what you think I'm worth, and I will sign it." And even then, the Cubs had to go and talk to their fellow owners secretly and say, "Are you guys okay with this? Because this kind of breaks our agreement, or our illegal agreement, no less." And then a day or two later, they tried to call him on his bluff. I think they filled in something like 500,000, and this was coming off of 11 years where he was clearly on a Hall of Fame path with the Expos. And Dawson took one look and said, "Yep, that's good. I'll sign it. I'm a man of my word." And then went on to win the MVP that summer.
Yeah.
So
So he delivered. Unfortunately, the team didn't. So that's
it was like a lot of mid 80s Cubs teams after 84. A lot of the vestiges of 84 were still around and were getting kind of old and bad, like your Jody Davises, your Keith Morelands. And they also really never developed pitching until Greg Maddux. Greg Maddux showed up that year, but it was his first year, and it was a very much a figuring out the league kind of year for him. He wasn't really good until about like 89, I think, is when it kicked in.
So, I'm going to move forward to the year after 1988, August 8th, the first night game at Wrigley. I know that was a big deal. I mean, they did. They played Philly. It was a rain out. Sutcliffe was pitching.
Huge.
But like, talk about, I guess, Wrigley Field, and talk about like how did you go to games when all of them were in the day? Like, did your dad take you out of school? Was it like okay since they were like the only team that didn't have lights?
It was. We only went during the summer. So it was when I was on summer break, and my dad is a teacher. So
okay, that makes sense. Okay, cool.
Yeah, we would sit down with the schedule and just look at June, July, and August and pick like 4 or 5 games that had the best giveaways. That was always the thing for me. Like if
absolutely,
a cat day or a beach towel, that's what I wanted. But I very much remember in 1988 just how different it felt going to Wrigley Field. And I didn't even go to a night game that year, but that was the year where they were in the middle of the season. They were adding the lights to the roof of the park while the season was going on. And what I remember most is just that mental image, that picture in my mind of the shadow of the light standards on the field for the first time, and just how kind of bizarre and different and almost out of place that looked for a little bit. Like this is something that we're not used to. And also the neighborhood, I remember, was very much against night baseball because they don't like drunks peeing in their lawns, oddly enough.
Yeah. So that was probably the main reason why they never got lights. Like they probably could have got lights like maybe 10, 20 years earlier.
They would have to go through Chicago politics to get them. And you know Chicago politics as well as I do. So it was a long, complicated process. And I remember another big memory is walking from where we parked the car in the neighborhood to the ballpark in those days. You would see a whole bunch of these bright yellow, no lights in Wrigley Field with red lettering, like the marquee in everybody's window. Like the neighborhood was uniting against them. So it was a huge battle. And it was a really the biggest night in Chicago sports in 1988 was the night of the first night game, even though it got rained out. That was they had Bill Murray in the booth with Harry Carey and Steve Stone on WGN. I still remember like the pregame ceremony. They brought out like a 91-year-old guy. I want to say his name was Harry Grossman, and I don't know why I remember the name, but I do. And he led everybody in the ballpark by chanting, "A 1, a 2, a 3, let there be light."
I remember that because it was a national televised. It was an NBC game, right? Because it was a special moment.
The second one was NBC. The first one was WGN because Harry Carey.
Okay,
that's the first one that got rained out.
Yeah,
Sandberg also hit a home run in that one too. So Sandberg actually has one more home run than he's credited for his Hall of Fame career, which I always think is cool. But yeah, it was Harry Carey and Steve Stone in the first night, and then the second night was against the Mets, and that was
Mets. Yeah, that's why I remember it so visibly. I remember watching it on TV with my father, and it was like, wow, this is they got lights. That's cool.
That's also, you go back as far as I do. So you remember in the late 80s, at least for us, Cubs-Mets was still a big
That was a rivalry. Yeah, I remember that was a big rivalry at the time.
We really wanted to beat Darryl Strawberry and Doc Gooden any chance we could get. Doc Gooden always shut them up their ass. But so beating the Mets in the first official night game was like a little bit of extra cool for that. Because that was also, I'm pretty sure 88 they won 100 games that year, right? They won
a game. They lost to the NLCS to the Dodgers.
Right. But that
7 games or
really
Hershiser.
Yeah. So cool to beat them, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 6-4 was the final. So I moved to the net following year, 1989, when you win the NL East. Again, Don Zimmer's the manager. Yep, Sandberg, Dawson, Mark Grace, Shawan Dunston, Rich Sutcliffe, Greg Maddux, Jerome Walton, who won Rookie of the Year. So many, those guys I remember very well. I remember having Jerome Walton rookie card. So that's another good feeling for you, right? They're back in the postseason again.
1989 was my favorite Cub team up until the 2016 team finally won it all. Yeah, that was because that one was completely out of nowhere. Like nobody saw that coming. Because that was a team that they just unloaded Rafael Palmeiro in the offseason to bring in Mitch Williams.
I remember that. Yep. Wild thing.
I don't really know why you did that. Pretty good. We found out later there were reasons, shall we say, that happened.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, 89, that team won, I think, 9 games total in spring training and just looked like it was going to be a mess.
It wasn't going to work. Yeah.
And for some reason that year, 10-year-old dumbass me picked that year to just be telling my dad every day in spring training, you watch that when it happens, they're going to turn it on. This is going to be something. And that was another year. Where
believed.
The Mets were supposed to run away with it. Like that was still prime Strawberry. And I think Doc Gooden was still pretty close to prime at that point. Right?
Gooden was still prime. Darryl, Kevin McReynolds. It wasn't better than 88, but it was still a solid team. I mean, the stars that were dwindling was Keith Hernandez and Gary Carter. They were on that. Those were their final seasons in a Met uniform anyway. But
that was a team of really a whole bunch of career years happening at once between Walton as Rookie of the Year, Dwight Smith, who was runner-up that year.
Dwight Smith's another guy. Yep.
Whole bunch of guys off the bench. Your Lloyd McClendons of the world were. For some reason, having 6 weeks of the best baseball of their lives when they needed them. And that was a team, 1989, that you could not hold down. Like, I have a very strong visceral memory of the signature game from that season. Was a late August game against the Houston Astros back when they were in the National League. And I was out, I wasn't watching for most of it. I was out playing with friends down the block. And then I remember, like, in the middle of that afternoon, my dad comes driving home from somewhere and sees me playing with some of the neighbor kids. And he just rolls down the window and yells out, "Hey, Kenneth, Cubs were down 9-0 and they're about to tie it." And I was like, okay, well, I think my afternoon has been scheduled now. So big quick review to my friends, ran home and got there around the 6th or 7th inning. They were down 9-0 in the 5th, I think. And then just kind of started chipping away. And then finally scored like 4 or 5 in the 8th to tie it up and ended up winning it in the bottom of the 10th on a Dwight Smith walk-off. And it was just the biggest celebration. And just, I remember throughout that game and on the telecast, as they were chipping away, they kept finding this one fan who was holding up this sign that he would update with like 4 down, 4 for the tie, 5 for the lead. So every time they'd score, it'd be 3 for the tie, 4 for the lead. And they just kept doing it over and over and over until finally at the end, he crossed it off 0, Cubs win. And yeah, it just felt like one of those miraculous years. And that was also the first year I got to go to a playoff game. The only game they won season. Game 2
was it a lot? Did you have to wait? How did you get the tickets? Did you have to wait online, or did you call Ticketron or whatever they had?
No, that's a fun story. So my aunt used to work for a company called Randy Hundley's Fantasy Camps, which was run by one of the 1969 Cubs.
Oh, get out of here! Nice.
People to make fantasy camps a thing, where
yeah, that's a big deal. Yep,
go to play with their heroes essentially. And so she had connections with that every so often to the Cubs, because Hundley is still pretty well beloved in Cub history. And I remember coming home from school, I think it was like a Thursday, and seeing a note on the table from my mom to my dad of, Dawn might have playoff tickets, give her a call. Yeah.
Wow.
So this a thing that's happening or something of that nature. She's like, wait for your dad to come home. We have to make sure it's okay with him. As if he would say, no, we're not doing this, as if there were any chance of that. And he got home and was like, oh, yeah. So we had to drive to my aunt's in the suburbs, get the tickets, and then make like a bat out of hell for Wrigley. And I remember walking toward the park, and it's the first time I'd ever been to a night game, too, was the first game I'd ever been to. So seeing the light lit up for the first time off in the distance and hearing Wayne Messmer singing the national anthem as you're walking to the park. And, oh, my God, just chills. And then I got to the park. Sandberg hit an RBI triple in the first right after we sat down. They scored 6 in the first, and it was just a party for 9 innings. Just one of my favorite nights of baseball I've ever seen in person. Yeah,
that sounds great. That's something if I was in that position, I'd be freaking out too. But that's awesome. But unfortunately, they lose to the Giants in the
then they went
NLCS,
lost all 3, and I remember, and this probably says more about me than it does about them, but that was the year of the earthquake interrupting the World Series.
Yep, Game 1. I remember it like it was yesterday. It's it was watching it on TV, and then it's like something out of a movie. You hear,
and I remember I was so mad and it's just so sad when the Cubs lost, because that was the dream season coming to a crashing end, and I just kind of, with tears in my eyes, telling my dad, I hope another earthquake hits San Francisco. And then in Game 3, coming home and seeing the news and thinking, oh my God, did I make this happen? Am I one of the X-Men? That's not good.
Like Magneto, man.
Evil.
That's right. Well,
at your peril.
Yeah, and the Giants end up losing anyway. It's the battle by the Bay, and
beat either of them, because that was the A's team that was trying to avenge '88, and they were.
That's true. Yeah. The A's, that team, like, even though they won that one World Series, they always, that was a stack. McGuire, Canseco, all the needles you can find.
The Hendersons. Yep, absolutely.
Yep. So all right, so that's 89. 1993, the movie Rookie of the Year comes out. How hyped were you to see that?
Loved it. Yes. I mean, that was the year. I mean, that was a movie that was going to be about a kid who was right around my age. I think Thomas Ian Nicholas might be a year younger than me, but that's right around my wheelhouse. A kid, getting essentially superpowers and pitching the Cubs to and I mean, I wanted to go just to be in the movie theater and imagining what it's like watching the Cubs going to a World Series. No real world conception for it at this point. But I saw it in the theaters, and actually when we were in quarantine and the pandemic was at its worst back in like April, I put it on Disney Plus and watched it for the first time in like 15 or 20 years. And the ending scene is of Henry Rowengartner back playing Little League with all his friends, and it ends with a shot of him leaping in the air after catching a ball, and the camera ends on a close-up of him wearing a Cubs World Series ring. And and it came true, kinda.
Yep. It took a while, but it happened.
And he's still Thomas Ian Nicholas, the actor, still gets invited to sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" every year at Wrigley Field.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's a cool thing.
Yeah,
That's one of the that's what I like. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Chicago's kind of adopted him as our guy. He says, like, everywhere he goes outside of the city, everyone yells American Pie when they see him. But when he comes to Chicago, it's always, hey, Rosenbagger!
Wow, that is cool, man. So I'll move forward to 1998. I guess it's sad because a legendary Harry Carey announcer, he passes. The impact him and Cubs baseball will live on forever. Talk about that day. Did you feel, when you heard the news?
Yeah, Harry had a few health scares throughout my baseball childhood. He had a stroke in 1987 that knocked him out for about the first 2 months of the year. And I remember they would have a whole bunch of guest announcers in his place. And it was a huge celebration the day he came back. Like, I think Reagan might have called into the booth that day as like a,
oh, wow.
Hey, welcome back, Harry moment. So he survived that, and there was a difference between pre-stroke and post-stroke Harry, as you would expect.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he was still, there was enough Harry Carey there where it was still like, yeah, I don't ever want to imagine the Cubs without him. I think there was also a health scare in, I want to say 94. He fainted in like a super hot day in Florida and had to miss some time, but again, came back. So, I mean, we knew, of course, at some point that Harry was going to die, and we would have to.
Yeah, you were prepared
without him, but there was always that sense of, until it happened, that Harry also felt kind of indestructible too. So I remember it was in Valentine's Day, I think, of 98 was when you got the news that he'd collapsed dancing with his wife out in Palm Springs and was in the hospital, and it wasn't good. And then a couple days later, I was at college, and I got an email from my dad with the subject line, "So long, everybody," which was how he always signed off his broadcasts. And I saw that immediately, and I just collapsed into tears. Like, you knew, like, and it was a part of my baseball childhood had died with me, because that was the only voice of Cubs baseball that I really knew. And as a kid, the coolest thing about Harry was you knew that this was somebody who was working well past retirement age, but it was someone in his 70s or 80s by the time he died, who was still clearly just having the time of his life at work every day. And how many places do you know where the coolest guy in the room is 76 years old?
Yeah.
And like, I remember even further back from that, when my dad used to take my sisters along with me and my mom to the ballpark. My sisters didn't care for baseball at all as kids, but the one thing that we all looked forward to during the seventh inning stretch, we'd always try to run out down to the aisles just to look up at the press box and see Harry leading everybody and take me out to the ball game.
Cool.
So yeah, it felt like I don't know what the Cubs are going to be like now without him. And it was a real, it wasn't a shock, but it was still just a sense of,
for him not being, you're not used to, like, it's going to feel different. That person that's been there forever is no longer there.
So, profound missing, I think, is the best way to describe it. But 98 was one of the most
great year. Yeah, great year. I'm getting that right now. They got to the wild card. Jim Riggleman is now the manager, and then you had Henry Rodriguez, Henry, and then 98 to me was like a resurrection for baseball. 'Cause remember, 94 they just came off the strike, so baseball's kind of dwindling as far as like ratings and stuff. Probably not the most popular sport as it once was when we were growing up. But yeah, that Cubs team was fun, especially the home run chase. Talk about Sosa and McGuire and the impact. Yeah, it
was. Sammy really came out of nowhere, even for Cub fans that year. Like going into 98, we had adopted him as one of the favorites, like, because he was. I want to say he like led the team in homers with 40 in 96, so had already established he had a power threat. But he was also an incredibly undisciplined hitter going into 98 that didn't draw walks hardly at all, struck out for that era a ton. Like, he would routinely put up like 120, 130, which for the 90s was humongous strikeout-wise. So there was always kind of a sense of, he's super talented, but he's also really frustrating to watch because you see that there's more there. You just don't know if he's going to tap into it.
Yeah, I always remember Sammy as being good. I remember he played for Texas, and then they had him. He was like a leadoff guy, kind of had like a Barry Bonds story. He's like well-rounded, and then he was a White Sox guy for a minute, and then yeah, once he got to the Cubs and like you didn't know he could hit the long ball. I didn't see it coming, but it's kind
Yeah.
of
We were actually hoping in the first couple of years he was with the Cubs that maybe certainly not Barry Bonds level, but that kind of player was the kind of player that we were hoping to get. The guy who could hit you 25 to 30 home runs in a year, then get on base, steal you 30 to 40 bases. He was the first Cub to hit 30-30, I think, home run stolen bases. And I remember he celebrated by showing up to Cub convention the next year with like a Flava Flav sized 30-30 pendant around his neck. It was the most Sammy thing.
wow.
But in 98, the first couple months in 98, like all of a sudden he was disciplined. Like you saw a huge difference in his approach at the plate, where he was taking that slider low and away, where every year leading up to that he'd be swinging it from his shoes. He was taking that and waiting for them to throw fastballs down the middle, trying to get in hitters' counts. So that in and of itself was a hugely exciting development just as a Cub fan. Like, oh, Sammy's learned. All right. Yeah. He's self-aware now. This is great. And then June of that year, where he hit home runs like almost every day. That was the year he hit the 20 home runs in June. Yep. And that was the moment where like he announced that, okay, everyone thought this was going to be McGuire-Griffey in terms of a home run race this summer.
Yeah.
And it turned out it's your boy Sammy.
Yep.
And that was just like the biggest thrill throughout the city. Like he was, it's impossible to overstate how huge he was. Like there was talk, because that was also the year of Michael Jordan's last year with the Bulls.
Yep. Yeah.
Famously chronicled in The Last Dance.
So 1998 is a big year in Chicago sports, definitely.
Right. And there was a sense that, well, Sammy was not going to be the greatest of all time the way Jordan was, obviously.
Oh, absolutely.
But in terms of the star of the city, there was definitely a sense that Jordan was kind of handing that off to Sammy, kind of as he did symbolically, throwing out the first pitch at the wild card playoff game in that fall. Because that was how big Sammy was. And the thing that really struck me as that year went on is starting to see him be that big in other ballparks too. Because also that year, that was my junior year of college, I went to Kenyon College in Ohio, which was about a 3.5-hour drive from Pittsburgh, and the Cubs had a weekend series in Pittsburgh.
Nice.
So my friends and I took a road trip to see one of the games, and we saw Sammy hit number 58 in person at Three Rivers Stadium.
Nice. And
I remember the entire ballpark giving him a standing ovation on the road and calling him out for a curtain call after hitting.
Wow.
And I'd never seen anything approaching that. Like you sometimes saw respectful standing ovations for opponents, but never like the other team's fans actually cheering their team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the big reason was because, like I said, with baseball, I think it was just good for the sport. You know what I'm saying? Even though later down the line, we're like, okay, with all the steroid allegations, but I mean, for that 98 year, like I remember it was all about the home run. Even like up here in New York, we very diverse, Washington Heights, Manhattan, big Dominican community. They were celebrating like he played for the Yankees or something. Yeah. They on their cars, Sosa 65, Sosa 60, like they were counting down. And I remember like I was like, damn, say everybody loves Sammy.
Oh yeah. Yes. And that's when I mean he was obviously became huge in his home country in the Dominican along too. And I want to say there was a hurricane that hit the Dominican either that fall or shortly after the baseball season. And Sammy kind of tried to become front and center of the efforts to clean up and kind of restore communities back then. So he was someone who, at least that year, you got the sense was really trying to give it back to the place that he came from. And obviously, pride in being Dominican was a huge part of who he was.
Yes, absolutely. Also, that year, the 1998 season, another special player, Kerry Wood.
Yep.
Rookie of the year. He had that famous game where he struck out 20, and I guess talk about him like coming up. And did you see it coming? Were there like rumbles in the farm system? Like, is this guy going to be that good? Or it was like, whoa, who is this guy?
The Cubs traditionally, this is the era before Theo, before they actually put together a legitimate core in their farm system in place. The way they would operate, there would always be one prospect who their GM or their team president would hype above all others, and then there would be nobody else in the farm. And Kerry Wood was that guy in the mid-90s. Like as soon as they drafted him, it was, you guys just wait until Kerry Wood gets here. This is somebody like a once-in-a-lifetime generational talent we've drafted. So when he got called to the big leagues in 98, it was a big deal because this was the new hope for the guy that maybe could lead us to the promised land. And he had a good couple starts and then a couple of shaky starts his first few. And then the 20 strikeout game was his 5th start that year, I think.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Nobody was prepared for what he was doing that day. And that was, again, I was away at college and I was listening to this one over the internet because the school year had just about over. I was just about to go back home for the summer. And what I remember about that one is that around the 7th inning, my roommate comes back and first thing he asks is, hey, Ken, what's going on? I heard you yelling out by the dining hall. Because that was just like this gradual unfolding of a realization of, oh my God, everything that they promised is arriving right now.
Uh-huh.
Because they struck out like the first 5 Astros that day, which in and of itself would have been all right. This is good enough today that he's showing the promise that there's something to believe on here. But it just kept going, and every inning, every strikeout, it just kept getting louder and louder. And in the 9th inning, I remember listening again over to the Cubs radio broadcast over the internet, and Ron Santo, the old Cubs color commentator over the radio for 20 years, whose job, even though his job was technically analyst, Ron Santo never analyzed. His job was to react viscerally and emotionally to everything that was happening in front of him. And just before the final strikeout, Pat Hughes, the great Cubs play-by-play guy on the radio, takes a moment, pauses so that you hear the crowd going nuts. And there were only 15,000 in the park that day, but they were it was as loud as you ever heard 15,000 people be. And nice. Pat Hughes turns to Santo and you hear him say, Ronnie, it feels like a World Series game. And Ron Santo, he's choked up. You hear the tears in his eyes as he turns to him and says, yeah, and if this kid pitching like this, we're going to be in a World Series.
Wow.
The very next pitch is the final strikeout to Derek Bell, and just a mob scene. And there was that real sense of promise in that day. And my dad emailed me again shortly after that and saying, can you believe this guy pitches for the Cubs?
Yeah.
Because it was not that this happened, but it was his 5th major league start. So there was that kind of unlimited possibility that unfortunately injuries kind of curtailed. But
yeah, it really did.
Really good career. Don't get me wrong. Kerry Wood was great and responsible for some of my favorite moments, even beyond the 20 strikeout games, both on TV and in person too. But I mean, that was far and away the highlights right there. And he never quite got to that level again, obviously. But yeah, it was part of the magic of that year.
Yeah, that was definitely like a good year. Unfortunately, they get the wild card, but they lose the division series to Atlanta.
That was. I mean, honestly, getting the wild card was kind of like our World Series that year because the 98 team was Sammy hitting the 66, Henry Rodriguez doing fine behind him, then a whole lot of guys who you were just kind of hoping were hanging on, and then you had Kerry Wood, but who was kind of injured by the end. I think he missed the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season. So then a couple of like veterans, savvy veterans, your Kevin Tappaneys or your Mark Clarks, again, guys just hoping that there was enough there to get them to the playoffs, and then anything beyond that was gravy. And then they met a Braves team that knew what to do. Two really great players on them. So
So that's how 98 ended. I'm gonna fast forward to 2003, where the Cubs, they win the division. Dusty Baker's now the skipper, his first year with the Cubs, and they beat Atlanta in the division series, goes a full 5 games, best out of 5. Chicago comes on top. Then the big National League Championship Series against the Florida Marlins, now the Miami Marlins, and the Steve Bartman incident. They're up 3. They're up 3 games to 2, right? 8th inning.
So I was there for that one.
Oh, you were there! Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, you were nice though, right? You didn't try to kill him.
No. So what happened with just from my perspective that night, we had incredible seats, and this was something that I just happened to get through on the internet when they put tickets on sale, which at the time felt
nice. You struck it gold. Dope.
Turned out to be reason number 1 why God doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But we had amazing seats down the third base line. Right around third base, I would say maybe 15 to 20 rows up. Just like, what a vantage point for a night that going in, we thought we could be here to see the first pennant since 1945. I remember driving to the park with my dad that night and him talking to his dad, asking him, "Were you alive for Three Finger Brown back in the day?"
Three Finger Brown.
Yeah, like we were just kind of getting our Cubs history on, because this was going to be Cubs history, and boy, did it turn out to be. And what I remember about that, I mean, going into that eighth inning, there was just this sense of impending joy because they scored in the first in that game. So, like, from the first inning on, it felt like, oh my God, this is it. They're doing it. Can you believe it? And during the seventh inning stretch, they had Bernie Mac leading the stretch, who is a Sox fan from the South Side, by the way.
But he's
had a show
huge
on
celebrity.
So cross programming. And Bernie Mac, when it came to the root part, sang out, root for the champs, the champs. And anybody who knew what was going on, anybody who has any knowledge of Cubs history heard that and goes, shut the fuck up, Bernie. Don't say that.
Jinx.
That was the feeling in the park. Like, there was a guy sitting behind us at one point, right around that time, who just yelled out, "I can smell the World Series!" And I wanted to smack him. Just, no, you don't say that with this team until it actually happens. So
very superstitious.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, how could he not be after?
Yeah, you're right. No, yeah, absolutely.
So we get to that eighth inning, and Juan Pierre makes the first out, and everybody in the ballpark, myself included, is holding up 5 fingers. Like an additional horseman, almost.
Yeah, additional horseman.
So then, where I'm seated, if you can kind of picture this, down the third base line, you see Luis Castillo loft the fatal pop foul down the third base line. And where I'm seated, I see Alou disappear into the left field corner, chasing after the foul pop. I see it descend. I see it bounce in the air. And then you just hear everybody in the park go, "Ah!" And then almost immediately you hear, "Asshole, asshole."
Oh, yeah.
Asshole. So I didn't see what happened because Alou had disappeared from my sight line. You can guess what had happened based on what you're hearing immediately. But I didn't see Alou slam his glove. I didn't see, I couldn't pick out one fan in particular reaching for it. But I knew, something bad had happened. But and there was no jumbotron either, so I couldn't see a replay. Yeah. So Castillo doubles on the next pitch, or later on in that at bat. And there's a sense of, okay, this isn't good. But think about this. At this point in the game, the Cubs are up 3-0, 5 outs to go to win the pennant. In the eighth inning, runner on second base. I'm sure in baseball history, there have been other teams who have been subjected to this particular predicament and gotten through it okay.
Yeah.
Like, as much as that moment was a very unique moment in terms of baseball history and the worst possible time for a fan to reach out like that, the team should have gotten out of it. You can get out of it. Like, even after the first one got driven in, it was still 3-1 with runners in first and second. And then Miguel Cabrera, and this is the part for me, Miguel Cabrera hits the easiest damn double play ball in the world, right at Alex Gonzalez, the good field, no-hit shortstop, who is there specifically to be a good fielder because he cannot hit. And Gonzalez, in that moment, you see him, especially from where I'm seated, take a step back as the ball gets up, glance off the bottom of his glove, hits the ground, and that's the point where I turned to my dad and said, "It's happening."
Yeah. It's real.
It just became just like this snowball effect of hope getting sucked out of the park, like to the point where not just the fans were ghostly silent, but even the PA announcer, you could hear depression in his voice, and just by the end of that game, like I was so sad and mad. I just thinking I need to purge this negativity. What do I do? And I was like, I have to cry. And so I did. And I just kind of started sobbing for 5 minutes, put my head on my dad's shoulder. Like it broke me.
And what were you there? I guess you were there, but did you see Bartman get carried like through the park by security, or?
I didn't see him. Like again, you would keep looking down in that area, and you would see people like throwing beer, but you like from that distance, all I saw.
Yeah, you can't see. Yeah,
I couldn't even tell again which was the guy who did it. But you kept hearing the asshole chants, and
it got ugly.
But I didn't see any one specific person.
Wow. So that was yep. So 2003 thought Marlins go in 7, and then they beat the Yankees in the World Series. And now, like after your team beats, Marlins beat the Yankees, you're like, wow, if the Cubs were in that position, they probably beat the Yankees too. So
with Pryor and Wood and Zambrano, I mean, certainly they had a shot. I mean, that was the idea that team was built around. This is our Koufax and Drysdale, maybe with one extra great pitcher thrown in too. And it turned out Zambrano had the best career of the three of them.
Yeah. So, that was a disappointing season, but good things to come. I'll fast forward to like 2007 and 2008. They win back-to-back Central Divisions under Lou Piniella. And but they get swept. They get swept in 07 by Arizona, and then 08 by the Dodgers. And the bright spot, you had another bright spot, Giovanni Soto, who ends up winning National League Rookie of the Year. It seemed like he started off good, and then he just fell off. What happened? Injuries or just
injuries? I think adjustments teams made to him at bat was part of it. And I'm sure just being a catcher probably also plays into it. That that position beats the hell out of you. So it's very hard to have a consistent career for anybody in that position. And the Cubs, I mean, they have a history of rookies of the year who have that great 1 year and then flame out. And Jerome Walton is the most prominent example. But Soto had a few good years beyond that, but nothing that lived up to 2008. Yeah.
So that was after that it was like. There was promise, but getting swept out the playoffs, didn't work out. The following year, 2009, the team sold fully to the Ricketts family, the majority the majority owner, and it seemed like was the atmosphere, was it the same, or was it like they definitely improved? Like
there was a real sense of everyone saying, "Okay, show us what you got," because in terms of Cub ownership. Very few people alive as Cub fans know what it's like to have an owner who actually cares about the team. Phil Wrigley, the owner of my dad's generation, was someone who just put money into making the park look good and never actually gave a damn how the team did. Tribune Company, you'd have good years under them, but you always got that sense that it was more about the bottom line with them as well. They were perfectly fine to sell beautiful Wrigley Field. So any new ownership, fans are especially. We didn't really know anything about the Ricketts. We're wary that, okay, is this going to be another group that just tries to sell the ballpark and doesn't really put money into the team to the point where winning is obviously their first priority? And for me, honestly, I desperately wanted them to get rid of Jim Hendry as a GM. And the fact that they kept him on board for a couple of years after that really soured me on them for a while. And it wasn't until they brought Theo in where I was like, okay.
Which is, 2011, Epstein's hired as a president. He did work so much wonder. He broke the Red Sox curse. Now I was like, all right, go break another team's curse. And that was probably one of the best things to happen.
I mean, the entirety of Cubs history shifts when they bring Theo Epstein in. It sounds like exaggeration, but it's not. Like it's all of a sudden the Cubs finally announced to the rest of baseball that we understand what year it is, and we're going to act like it's then 2012 and actually do this the right way and the way everybody else who's successful in baseball is doing it for the first time in my lifetime, certainly, and probably in my dad's too.
Cool. Yeah. So I'll fast forward to the big. This is where things started happening. 2015.
Yes.
They win 97 games under Joe Maddon's now the manager. That infield is insane. That's a great infield. All-star. Everybody was an all-star. Rizzo, Addison Russell, Starlin Castro, Chris Bryant,
Mhm.
young. Is this like the best like Cubs at like just such young promise, especially like like young hitters. I mean, you had Jake Arrieta, even though the pitching was kind of. I always
Mhm.
felt like being a Mets fan around that time. I always felt the Cubs had the most hitting and the Mets had the most pitching. And
Right.
maybe if there was a deal between the two, it was like, all right, we'll give you this pitcher, you give us this, offensive guy. That would have been cool. But that team looked very, very like there was a lot of
Yeah.
promise there.
There was that was again probably the first time in my life, and maybe probably the first time since the late '60s, where you could see a core that the Cubs had kind of carefully assembled over several years coming together at the same time and maturing and realizing, oh my God, this is working. Like
Yeah.
that was the like, and you had no point of comparison for that because there had never been a long term plan carried out that successfully in my life before. So that was one of the big thrills of realizing that staying on board through the really awful years of the rebuild in 2012 when they lost 100 games and a couple of years after that, that there was going to be a payoff and it was going to be the best thing that we could have imagined. And so, yeah, so seeing it all kind of come together, like there are so many points in that year. Like you could point to like even when they signed John Lester in that previous winter in the winter meetings, like as soon as I saw that on Twitter, I went to kind of a group Cub fan Facebook message with our friends Adam Amawala and Kevin McCaffrey, and I just typed out, "This is better than Christmas."
Them.
Yeah, I typed, "This is better than Christmas," and it was because John Lester was worth every penny. It turned out, and then Arrieta, that we knew that there was potential there, but we didn't see 2015 Arrieta coming. Like that, I've never seen like maybe any pitcher, let alone a Cub pitcher, who was that locked in dominant for that long a stretch of time. Because the feeling with that was the sense of, that he just keeps shutting the teams out over and over. So eventually there's going to be one start where he might not have it today or whatever. And that start just didn't happen for the rest of the season. And then, you've got Rizzo becoming every bit the player that you hoped for when they traded him. Bryant is the rookie of the year, completely living up to Bryant had the most hype of any Cub prospect. Maybe.
Yeah, I remember hearing about him a lot. And
maybe since Billy Williams-ish, maybe. But after a fan base that's used to the Corey Pattersons, the Felix Pies of the world is always going to be show me mode. But seeing Bryant become that guy that they said he was going to be, again, that was also this is allowed to happen to the Cubs. So 2015 was a miraculously fun year.
And 97 wins, and but it's 97 wins, but not even good enough for second in the Central Division. That's great because the Cardinals won 100 and the Pirates won 98. No, they were tied at the end, so they had to play a tiebreaker game.
It was the one gamer. Yeah, they
were the one game. Yeah,
they were in third place. So that meant because they were the two best teams that weren't first place teams, they were going to be in the one game playoff. And man, that was a night. And again, that was the Cubs arriving because that was Kyle Schwarber launching a pitch.
Yeah, that's another guy. Yeah,
and making everybody in Pittsburgh shut the hell up, and Arrieta just inning after inning. And then beating the Cardinals in the NLDS after that was
3-1. Yep, 3 games to 1. And only to get swept by the Mets. But I can't take any pride into it because they lost to the Royals.
I mean, you had what we wanted. Like if the Cubs had made the World
I'll trade you 2016 for 2015.
Given what happened the next year, I'm perfectly fine with how things turned out. But I mean, you couldn't be faulted at that time for thinking, oh man, with Syndergaard and
Matt Harvey,
and Mats, the Mets have got a foundation for a long-term thing because that year's Cubs team, that was the one thing they didn't really know how to handle was just
it was like I think a lack of experience because they didn't even it was a sweep. It was and that Mets team came on late too. That 2015 season wasn't really supposed to go down like that, but they definitely overachieved, and it was a fun run while it lasted. And like I said, the Cubs, I was a little bit scared because you have these young promising guys. I mean, they got swept, but this team will be around for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they made more moves that offseason that really were pivotal and kind of that really great 2015 team into the 2016 juggernaut.
Yeah, what's funny is the 2016 team, like they trade away Castro, and then what's the name? They sign Ben Zobrist.
Yes, Lester is probably the best Cub free agent signing of all time. Maybe Zobrist and Dawson are probably the other two that are right there with him, because Zobrist was everything they needed that offseason. That's someone who was contact first, who could work a count. And also just somebody who'd been there. Like he just beat them.
Yeah, he has the experience, a 2-time All-Star before he got there. He was like, so he was a solid player throughout his whole career. Very good, like a guy you always can use in a clubhouse.
Yeah.
So
one of my favorite Cubs of all time. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's when
a little
you got the
little plush Ben Zobrist here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Looks nothing like.
Was that a giveaway or you bought that?
No, my mom put it in my Christmas stocking last year.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. So, that signing ends up that Cubs team 2016. They rebound from last year's sweep. They win 103 games. Couldn't ask for more. Division series 3-1 against San Francisco. NLCS 4-2. Against Dodgers, and then the World Series happens. You're finally there. How was the feel? How was the rhythm? Did you move back to Chicago already, or you were still in New York?
No, I was still in New York for that.
Okay.
And yeah, I was thinking of coming home for it, but my mom and dad wanted to spend Halloween week with my sister, brother-in-law, and my niece and nephew because they have actual priorities. So I was like, if I can't watch it with my dad in person, I might as well just stick around for most of it. And I was going to be coming home to work the road at the very end of it as well. So if it had gone the full 7 as it did, I would be kind of in the area for that. But that's further down the story. But God, there is no real word to kind of describe that sense of obviously ultimate joy, also experiencing that kind of joy for the first time, and a sense of like the epic quest arriving at the point where your goal is about to be met, like that happened when they made that World Series. I was watching the Game 6 against the Dodgers at my home in Astoria at the time, and the little things I remember throughout that day, like in the middle of that afternoon, just I realized kind of unconsciously, until I realized I was doing it, that I just kept saying, "We got this. We got this. We got this." Nobody was in the room, but that was the level that my nerves were at, because I was flashing back to 2003 and
absolutely.
You can't help it when you go through.
You can't help it. Yeah.
Kind of fan trauma in person. And I realized how lucky I am to be able to say fan trauma like that. But, when they got the double play to end Game 6, I jumped off the couch and screamed. And I remember turning to my roommate at the time and just looking him in the eyes and just yelling, "Hug me!"
Well, that had to rattle your nerves a bit, because it went a full 7 games.
Oh yeah, the World Series. By the end of the World Series, I was physically ill. Like I was coughing myself to sleep every night. Like I had sinuses clogged. Just a wreck.
Not to mention, it's against another team who haven't won in a long time. Which city hasn't won in a long time too. Cleveland. Anything in Cleveland till LeBron did it. That year. It's like it was. Cleveland had a drought in Chicago. I mean, Chicago's drought is well documented forever. But Cleveland fans were suffering too. I remember those good Cleveland teams with Albert Bell and Baega, and those teams were kind of built to go somewhere, but they always came up short, back then. So it was from an outsider look, I was like, all right, both fans are suffering, but I'm tired of Cubs fans crying. So I like if the Cubs win it, that'd be cool.
We wore it down. Yes. That's the long game all along.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, had they not been playing the Chicago Cubs, 100%, I would be rooting for Cleveland to win any World Series they play in. And that was, the thing about them was that wasn't a dominant Cleveland team by any means. They had great players like Lindor.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't think I remember anybody on the team, to be honest. Brantley, maybe. I can't, like, off the top of my head. You asked me who was on that Cleveland team. I couldn't tell you.
Brantley was probably their best player at the time, and he was hurt.
Yeah.
So that was kind of one of the ways the Cubs were lucky. And Kluber obviously is.
Kluber was good. Yeah.
But beating Cleveland at that point, it felt less like meeting another juggernaut and more like you had to figure out how to solve that puzzle that no other team in the playoffs had to that point between Andrew Miller and Cody Allen at the back end of their bullpen. Because that's how they were doing it, was figuring out how to like make the games half as long. If they got a lead by the fifth, like the way Terry Francona was managing, those games were over. And that was driving me nuts as a Cub fan. Like this juggernaut team that we had built up to this point to be this incredible curse-breaking squad, we're going up against like the riddle of the Sphinx almost.
Yeah.
Logical, I guess. Yeah. And what really ended up happening in that World Series, I think, is that because they were able to win Game 5 at Wrigley and make it go to a long series, that ended up doing it for them. Because when it becomes a long series, that's when you can finally start to see a little bit of the use that Terry Francona is using between Miller and Allen start to come into effect on the field. Like by the end of Game 7, Andrew Miller, David Ross was hitting a home run off Andrew Miller. And that wasn't going to happen until that point.
Yeah. Plus, you had the rental in Chapman, too. So.
Yeah. I mean, you don't win a World Series without him, like without those 2 2/3 of Game 5. But I certainly would have liked someone who wasn't a piece of shit to a big part of the Cubs team, but
So talk about when it's all said and done and the Cubs win and rejoice. What did you do?
I'm gonna try to condense it because I mean this could be a 15-minute story if you let me. So Game 7, I had to work part of that night because I was working in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, opening for Jimmy Pardo.
Nice.
Name drop. Almost messed up my name drop there for a second. So part of that was on the Wednesday I had to do a casino gig in Dubuque, Iowa, which is kind of on the Illinois-Iowa border. And it's a casino gig, and for some reason, they were not going to cancel the show, even though that's very much the heart of Cubs country.
Yeah.
So 20 people had to look at me at a stage and go, huh? For 20 minutes? So, but part of that was that, as I said, I was stressed to the point where I almost couldn't take it. My system couldn't handle it. So I was kind of glad to have 20 minutes early on in that game where I could step away and just have to concentrate on saying my act for 20 minutes and not worry about everything that was going on. I'd seen Fowler's leadoff home run, Dexter Fowler lead that game off with a home run. So I'd already seen like the first pivotal key moment of that. So that was exciting. But I watched most of the rest of that game in the hotel across from the casino from about the 4th inning onwards is when I was tuned in. And just losing my damn mind. Like every moment of that game. Like in any game, the two things that drive me most nuts are bad umpiring or bad managing. And that game had them both in spades in the middle of it. Like as soon as Madden went to lift Hendricks, it felt like this could be going off the rails. I don't know what you're doing. I love Joe Madden, and I've kind of figured out in retrospect what it was. But in the moment, I was just screaming at the TV like, why is this happening? You didn't have to do this. So we get to the pivotal 8th inning. Cubs up 6-3. 2 outs, nobody on. Cubs up by 3 in an 8th inning. They have to win a playoff series. Where have I heard this before? Where have we might have discussed this a half hour ago in this very podcast? So the Indians start making some noise in the 8th, and they cut it to 6-4. And you can see that at this point, Chapman's in the game, and Rajai Davis is up. And this is a point now where I'm starting to recognize to myself, this is an unhealthy level of stress. Like even for me, like I might need a second here. So what I'm going to do in this moment of the game, I'm going to turn the TV off for a second. I'm going to spend a minute or two thinking good thoughts, thinking of all the ways, or roll it down multi-time all-star closer and piece of shit, but nonetheless, all-time great closer is going to strike out Rajai Davis, who is just, after all, a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do. I turn the TV off, and I pace the hotel room for a couple minutes, just trying to send any good karma my way toward Cleveland.
Uh-huh.
And I turn the TV back on, and it's 6-6.
Oh, God.
What? What? How? Like, in that moment, like, I'm just thinking, how did this team, this all-time great Cubs team, this juggernaut, who brought in this specific guy to prevent this specific situation from happening, how did this happen? And all I could think of was, they did it to me again. You did it to me again.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, I went from like crazed, manic nuts to just immediately dead inside. And I just kind of lay down on the bed, and I just kind of watched and just was resigned to it at that point. Like, yep, okay, this is how it's going to happen this time. I'm just going to watch it. I know how this is going to end. At least I know the ending of it. I just have to see how it's going to reach that tragic ending this time.
Wow.
And so we get to the rain delay part of it. And now as soon as I see them pulling the tarp in the field, my only thought is, so the only thing worse than lose right now is that they're going to and I'll have to
it's definitely going wrong. Yeah, something bad's going to happen.
Yeah. So by the time the game starts, I made a promise with myself that I am not going to give them my emotions anymore unless they actually win. I see them win and get a third out with a lead at this point. I just can't. You've already destroyed me as a human being. I can't give you any more. I can't give no more. So during the rally of the 10th inning, as this is all happening, as Schwarber leads off with the single, and as Almora tags up and goes to second, I'm thinking these are good baseball plays, but I can't give you any emotions. I know this is good, and I want this to happen, but I got to protect myself. I got to hold something back.
You got to protect yourself.
And so I'm watching, Zobrist's key at bat, where he's fallen off a pitch to the left side, and I'm thinking, I wonder if there's a hole down third base that maybe he's trying to find. And next pitch, sure enough, is the one that he lines down the third base line for the double that gives them the go-ahead run. And so it's like, yeah, Ben, that's great. Still, can't really commit yet. And they get the insurance run, and that's great too. But again, get the 3 outs. Now you got to get the 3 most important outs ever. And we go to the bottom of the 10th. And now this is where it all just, like, everything in my fandom leads up to this half inning here. And Carl Edwards Jr., who was really, really solid for them that year, but is also, I think that's if his rookie or second year, I forget which, but very young pitcher is now being tasked with the most important inning in franchise history. But he's got it on. Like, he strikes out Napoli, then he gets a ground out. So you get the 2 outs, no problem, real fast. And then he walks the next guy. Oh, man. Now I'm mad. And I get off the bed again, and I'm yelling and cursing at the TV. And I stop for a second, and I turn to myself, and I go, "Don't emotionally commit." So, yeah, I don't know anymore. Like, I just don't know anymore. Just end this game. Just finish it. Get this last out. I am begging. And as you see them change pitchers as the tying run is now on base, and Mike Montgomery's in because they've driven in one of the runs. And I'm just begging anybody, end this. And so they come back from commercial, and Montgomery gets the first curveball over for a strike. And okay, at least you can throw strikes. That's good. Second pitch is the Michael Martinez ground ball to third. And I don't know if you remember kind of how that played out, that it's the short ground ball, and you hear Joe Buck. This is going to be a tough play, Bryant. And Bryant fields it, scoops, and throws. And as he throws, you hear Joe Buck yell, "The Cubs!" And there's a little pause in his call. And it's in that moment where he pauses where I realized, holy shit.
He did it.
World Series winning call. And so right as the ball makes contact with Anthony Rizzo's glove, I am off the couch, exploding, and just leaping, jumping up and down and screaming my head off. And then about 30 seconds later, just collapse at the foot of the bed and just gut sob. Like,
did you look like Michael Jordan in '96 when he fell?
Without any of the skill, but yeah, all right, like emotion. Like, I just remember like burying my head in my hands and just repeating, "They did it! They did it! They did it!" My phone is exploding in my pocket, but I can't look. I'm just overcome. And you look up and you see the TV, the players in a dog pile.
It really happened, yeah.
Graphics, like on not just the broadcast, but on the Jacobs Field scoreboard. Congratulations, world champion Chicago Cubs. Oh,
this is really happening.
When I am alive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so finally composed myself about 5 minutes later. And at that point, I called my dad. And
I was going to ask you,
we watched the trophy celebration and the locker room celebration together. And like that's a moment I wish for everybody, just to have that moment of arrival and sharing it with someone that gave this to you. And it turns out
plus a long time, you know, a century, over a century. This is, it
was the appropriate end to the most epic quests in baseball history. And I'm so thankful to be there to witness it and to be a fan for it. Like to the point now, like we're 4 going on 5 years removed from it. And we're now where it's like,
but it's still fresh where you can still celebrate it. Like,
I watch them and I get mad at them still. Especially now with the way they're playing the Cardinals this weekend. But in the grand scheme of things, if that is all I get out of being a fan, we're good.
Yeah, like, you could say I lived to see the Cubs, witness the Cubs win a World Series while I was alive.
I wanted to know what it was like, and it was better than like anything I could have imagined, which I imagined a lot. So that's really saying.
So that had to be a beautiful thing, man.
Yeah.
What about did Parade? Did you? I guess you watch it on TV,
again in Iowa for work.
Working,
that weekend. So I watched that they had Chicago cable on the hotel TV. So I watched it all on TV, and the parade just was this again sense of I can't believe that this is happening with my team. Like I see this happen every year. I know it happens every year. I just never conceived that I was allowed to be invested in something like this. Like I remember like the for several days afterward, like every time like I'd turn on the Chicago sports radio station and you'd hear somebody mention the words World Series champion Chicago Cubs.
You're like, wow.
Like, what?
Like this is really happening, man.
Yeah. And so when I drove back to Chicago from Iowa, like you see the skyline off in the distance and looking at it and yelling, baseball champions of the world.
And, people are probably still partying to this day. It's just
I mean, that entire offseason was just like just one big sense of joy and arrival and a sense that it had all been worth it. That's the best part. Like everybody had the sense of, okay, nobody knew that this was coming, but now that it's here, man, thank God.
Yeah. So so that great thing happened. So the following year they win 92, but they beat Washington in 5 in the division, but they lose to the Dodgers in 5. But you're still probably like, oh well, we won it last year. So
I mean, at the end of it, it was like, okay, this is a better Dodgers team, so this is their year, unless they run into a team that might happen to be cheating. Which, who knew? But I mean, and 2017 was an underrated fun Cubs team too. I mean, it certainly suffers in comparison to the greatest baseball year of our lifetimes, but you still had moments like they clinched the division that year in St. Louis, which is always great for Sean.
They
eliminated the Cardinals the next day on a leaping catch at the wall that would have been a walk-off homer, which was also fun. That playoff series against the Nationals was phenomenal. Hendrick outdueling Strasburg in Game 1, and then Game 5, which was just one of the most insane games of baseball that wasn't Game 7 of the World Series ever played. Still had a happy ending. Yeah, I mean that was kind of afterglow baseball.
Yeah. So 2018, they win 95 games, and then they play the tiebreaker in Milwaukee. And then they win to play the playing game, but they lose to Colorado.
Yeah, that was a year that just kind of that felt like it was heading somewhere. Probably around, especially around like mid-August when you had the game where David Bodie hit the walk-off grand slam to take him all the way back from 3-0 with 2 outs in the ninth. Like you felt, okay, like this is also going to be a fun, just hell of a year. And that was about the last real great moments. And then they brought in homophobe Daniel Murphy, and that pissed me off. And then ended up playing like 40 games in 41 days.
Yeah, he didn't have a good year.
Yeah. And by the end, you could see that the offense just was sputtering and they were dead tired. And yeah, there just wasn't anything there by the time those Milwaukee and Colorado games rolled around.
Yeah, and then the following year, 2019, which was last year, they failed to make the postseason, and then they did not renew Joe Madden's contract. Talk to us about that. I mean, what were you feeling when you saw Madden go?
Yeah, I would have been fine with them bringing him back. Like that was around the time where the general sense seemed to be that both sides kind of felt that this was time for a mutual parting of the ways. That Joe Madden is far and away the best Cubs manager I've ever seen, and probably ever will see, honestly. So I have a real problem letting the best manager I'll ever see go willingly like that.
Yeah,
I understand some of it, but I think in terms of Joe's legacy here in Chicago, it actually benefits a bit from him being let go at that time. Because
he doesn't look bad. Most of his resume was like winning. They had all winning seasons under him, right?
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, it's close enough to the World Series where everybody still remembers that like in front of mind. And you didn't really have like a catastrophically bad couple years where everyone's now just kind of waiting for his contract to end. So like he's remembered here and will be remembered here probably for as long as there is
a very long time
franchise as the guy they brought in to put them over the top, and the guy who did put them over the top came and did what he set out to do.
Yeah. So last year it doesn't work out, but I mean Joe Madden's gone, but now they hire David Ross, who's the Cubs catcher, also. And how do you feel about what he's doing now? And I guess this weird season that we're going through.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really tough year to evaluate anybody in baseball just because we're forcing them to play a game during a global pandemic, and that itself is already insane. He has done a pretty good job at really kind of getting them focused from day one. They had that 13-3 stretch to start the season. And that was really his honeymoon period with everybody here, where it just felt like, okay, David Ross obviously is the shot in the arm they needed, and that's probably not the case. But it's certainly everything that we heard about him being able to relate to the players and be a clubhouse leader was really showing itself early on. And now is really the test when they've had this really rough stretch for the past couple of weeks that's climaxed in this terrible series against the Cardinals. And now he's got 2 of his 5 starters injured. A lot of the offense is just utterly sputtering. Chris Bryant and Javi Baez are lost.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah.
So now this is okay, let's see what you got. And we're going to find out. One of the things we apparently have found out about him is that when he decides he's going to put guys, especially guys who are his core players, at certain parts of the lineup, he is going to stick with them hell or high water. Like he is not dropping Javi Baez out of that 3 or 4 spot in the lineup.
Yeah.
Even though Javi has not been good almost from the start of the year.
Wow. Yeah. So, well, hopefully it looks, there's time.
Oh, yeah, there definitely is.
Yeah.
I mean, as I say, this is where we're finding out exactly what he's made of. And they're still in position to make the postseason. I mean, as to how good they are, they really haven't done much to improve the team in the offseason in general over the past couple of years. So that also is kind of coming into play here, as we're probably starting to see the effects of what happens when you essentially have 2 off seasons in a row. So regardless of how good a manager he is, sometimes when you've got this as your bullpen and this as your pitching depth, you can only do so much.
Yeah. So that's now we're up to present speed. I also want to bring up recently you were on Fox 5 News talking about the Tom Brennaman situation. If the people that out there don't know who Tom Brennaman is, he's a play-by-play guy on the Cincinnati Reds. he dropped
Yeah,
a
he dropped
very
an F-bomb.
bad thing. Yeah, during didn't know the mic was hot,
Mhm.
and he got caught. I didn't really catch on. I was a little late to the party, and then when I heard it, I was like, "Whoa, okay."
Yeah, I saw it
So,
floating on Twitter, and I went to our Outsports Slack channel immediately and posted the clip of it. And
uh-huh.
in like 2 seconds, my editor just writes back, "Oh my God." So
Yeah.
we knew this had to be something we had to throw out a story about immediately. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
so I spent most of that Wednesday night writing it out, and we posted it either late Wednesday or early Thursday. And it
Hmm.
was getting spread around a fair amount because it was the big story in baseball for a couple
Hmm.
days. And my editor texted me early Thursday morning just a screenshot of Jennifer Williams from Fox 5 News contacting me on Twitter saying, "Hey, saw your story. Would you like to come on the newscast this afternoon and talk about it?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I'm getting my New York TV credit 2 years.
Yeah. Not even in New
Oh,
York.
it worked out perfectly. Yep. So
Well,
yeah.
once everything runs up, hopefully, like, yeah, the timing sucks because like you would be booked everywhere now.
Yep. Yeah. It turns out out of towners do get all the stage time in New York City. What the
Yeah.
hell? Uh, yeah, so that's 3 o'clock that afternoon. We just had a 10-minute interview with her, and was very pleasant. And yeah, I talked about both the sense of you really hear in the way he says the word on the air.
Yeah,
That,
that's what bothered me. I was like, whoa.
yeah,
You can't,
it's
yeah.
abundantly clear that he uses this on the regular, and
Yeah.
there's this real tone of just disdain and almost hate that kind of comes
Yeah, it
through.
was absolutely, yeah, that's what got me because I was like, all right, wait, let me see, is it that bad? And I was like, yeah, this is bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
it's, but one thing we're trying to emphasize, and I emphasize this both in my article and in talking about it on the news, is that this is also a point for Brenneman where he's got a decision to make, where he can kind of retreat into the idea of, oh, it's cancel culture, come for me, and
uh-huh.
political correctness run amok. And thankfully, it seems like he hasn't gone that route.
Yeah.
But now he's got to take time and actually do the work to
Hmm.
get to know people in the LGBTQ community, listen to them, listen to exactly why that causes us pain when we hear
Hmm.
that word, why that means what it does to us, get
Uh-huh.
involved with LGBTQ charities and community outreach efforts, and really just try to improve yourself because there is potential for Brenneman to become an ally. Like the
Yeah.
example that we've been using on the site is Tim Hardaway, who
Yeah, I remember that too. Yeah.
famously said, "I hate gay people" in
Uh-huh.
2007, I think. And
Yeah.
then after kind of retreating away from the spotlight and volunteering for the Trevor Project and working with LGBTQ groups in his hometown, like
Hmm.
he then became like the first guy to sign his name on a petition to legalize gay marriage in Florida. So it is possible.
Yeah,
Uh,
you realize the error of your ways, and
yeah,
we're at the end of the day, we're all in this together. We're all humans, and we need to, respect everybody, no
right.
matter what, unless
Yeah.
they're bad people. you know?
And it is also possible to be a terrible person.
Yeah.
But person, it is possible to put in the work, become a good person. But
Yeah.
there's also a key to that. You have to keep putting in the work. You can't
Yeah.
just put in a little bit of volunteer time and then say, okay, I got my get out of bigotry free card.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
This is something you have to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was very proud when I saw that. I was like, oh yeah, there he is.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
was a kick to be able to do that. And yeah, I as I say, first New York TV credit. So it was a thrill to do it. And I'm glad that hopefully I was able to spread a message of the importance of inclusion
Yeah.
and the importance in doing the work to connect to the community better that way.
Absolutely, man. All right. So yeah, thank you, Ken, for being on this, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate all the knowledge. Now I know more about, the Cubs and how, passionate. I know how passionate, like when I started this show, you were always a guy of vision to talk. This was definitely in the stars, I guess, so to speak.
Well, thank you very much.
So
It's been a
yo,
pleasure playing too. As you know from talking to me outside of the podcast,
yeah,
this is the kind of thing I will talk about regularly in general.
forever, yeah. This could go on way longer, but
Yeah,
this
I'm
was
glad to get this down for posterity's
yeah.
sake. So.
Yeah. Anything else you want to plug before you go, bro?
Sure. I've got, as you mentioned, the Three Strikes You're Up podcast is every Friday. Just search Outsports in your favorite podcast engine. We do different podcasts every day of the week, my colleagues and I, and they're all great. Mine is every Friday. It's baseball centric, but yeah, please do check it out. And then Outsports and Baseball Prospectus. I'm writing for both of those sites regularly.
All right. Thank you so much, Ken, for being on. I appreciate it. And hopefully we can get together and do something. I mean, I was hoping to get with you in Chicago that last time, but I know, it just wasn't meant to be. But hopefully we get to hang out and do this soon, man.
Yeah, I'm now 10 minutes from Wrigley. So whenever travel becomes a thing again, yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Thank you, man. I appreciate you, man. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye. All right, guys, that was Ken Schultz. Follow him on his social medias, as you see on the ticker. Follow us at Root for Laundry. We'll have another guest and another team the next time. My name is Johnny McDonald. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Take care.